What's going on, everybody? It's Tyler from Dirt Road Country. I've got a really special guest next to me. I don't typically do this, and I'm trying to start doing it more, but everything that happens in country music is because of the songwriter. You don't get songs without the songwriters, and I've got one of the best in country music right next to me. His name's Anthony Smith, and he's cut a lot of big time songs, and he's got his own albums out there, which are awesome. But some of those songs include, and I've got a list because there's so many. I've got this list right here. You wrote Run by George Strait, Cowboys Like Us by George Strait, I'm Trying and Chrome by Trace Atkins. What do you think about that, Montgomery Gentry? And a whole lot more. Anthony, it's a pleasure having you on here. How you doing?
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. How's everything going with you? We're getting into the spring and the nice weather's finally coming.
Things are, I'm doing well, just doing a lot of shows out there on the road, and writing songs and doing the music business thing.
Love that. And like I mentioned, you've written a ton of songs. First thing I wanted to start off with was you put out a debut album back in 2002. It's called If That Ain't Country, and it's a really, really good album. What was everything like back then, and how does it feel thinking back on it being 23 years ago? And I think you had three songs that charted on the Billboard Top 40 charts, if I read that correctly.
Mhm. It was a magical time. It was a real special record. It was the uh, the industry was really, there's a lot of buzz about it and stuff, and we ended up signing a record deal with Mercury Records, and Shania Twain was the hottest artist in the world at the time, and so nobody else at the label did did broke at all. So that's which is why Toby Keith left the label, and I didn't know that when I signed there. I could have signed anywhere, and I don't know why I signed at Mercury, but it was the bad label to be on at that time, and but the record, it was a magical moment, of creativity, and the way we made that record was unique. They just didn't make records in that process in Nashville, and took us, a long time to make it because we wanted to make it. I wanted to approach it like the Eagles would have approached making a rock and roll record, which
Yeah.
is, free production, orchestrate the music and know how you want to lay it down in advance, and um, it was just, and at the time I was the new kid on the block, I was a young guy who was writing a different style of music than most people, very concept oriented,
Yeah.
and a lot of story songs that were, I loved painting pictures with lyrics. And when we put it all together, the guy who produced it, Bobby Terry, he was, he just did such an amazing job on it. And but I get calls about every day from somebody about talking about that record even today. And I know Chris Stapleton told me it was his favorite country record of all time. And I Luke Bryant had sent a video here a couple of years ago. He was driving around in his truck and was playing my CD, and so I get that from a lot of my peers, and so I, it was a great moment in time, and it got me touring the country, and some of the best venues, and it's a great memory. Toured with Willie Nelson for a year, and
Awesome.
yeah, it was wonderful. It was a dream come true, and I'm still out there touring. I haven't got a new record out yet, but I think I'm going to put one out here pretty soon.
And I can't wait
And
to hear it.
yeah, I've been even doing house concerts, man, and they are just, well, I like them because they're so personal. They're
Mhm.
so intimate. Everybody's close around. They can hear everything you're doing, and you can actually talk to them. So been doing some of those as well as theaters, But anyway, good stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know during COVID and everything, when a lot of artists were going out and not being able to play shows and they were doing all these backyard concerts and stuff, I thought it was
Mhm.
so cool. I love that you're doing that. And
Yeah.
Well, I know you said you got to play a lot of awesome venues. Do you have a top three list of the coolest places you got to play?
Um, I got to play Farm Aid,
Oh wow, yeah, that's
which
awesome.
was, yeah, I got to do that. That was a big deal because so many iconic artists were on there. You know, obviously Willie, and it was hosted by emceed by Matthew McConaughey, and I got to hang out with him some. Really cool guy, and Kid Rock. You know, hung out with him some. Ended up writing with him, and but yeah, that was a really good memory. The Grand Ole Opry, of course, is always up there. You know, especially your first appearance. And every time I've ever played it, I loved it. Played at the Ryman as well. So yeah, those are all good venues. Of course, you got to your big festivals with maybe 100,000 people, and I played. Uh, they helicoptered me into the Atlanta Speedway at the Atlanta Speedway race, and I think it was a couple 100,000 people there. And I had to sing. They were playing my video on all of the jumbotrons, and when they introduced me, and then I had to sing "Sweet Georgia," um, which you don't want to mess up in
No,
Georgia.
I'm wearing a Georgia shirt right now, so I get that.
Yeah, and so I was really lucky to play some really cool gigs and did a lot of shows with just about everybody out there at some point. And but yeah, it was I love it.
I love that. And you mentioned a new record possibly coming soon. So with that and throughout all these years, you have to have I'm sure you have a process for writing a song. Do you have a songwriting process? And if so, what is it typically? Does it range from like different categories of songs, whether you're trying to write a sad song, a honky tonk and dance song, you know?
I generally most of the time I don't sit down with any preconceived notion of what I'm going to write. Um, and I just most of the time I just start fumbling around with the guitar until I hit something that registers that inspires something.
Mhm.
Um, try to come up with something different and unique. I'm not a formula writer, so I like to just to write from my imagination instead of what's necessarily popular or trend. I like to just come up with something, and so the process, and then sometimes an idea will hit me. I usually start from the first line of the song, and very few writers do that. Most of them start with a hook and write around it.
Mhm.
And there's no right way or wrong way. But for me, most of this time I start with the first line after having a melody, or have a first line and come up with a melody. And that way, if you don't write around a hook, then you're not boxed in. You can say anything you want, and the hook will reveal itself by the time you get there. For me, anyway, and that's the way I enjoy writing the most. So it's all about what you're comfortable with and what you know inspires you the most, really.
Awesome, yeah. When I think of a song as a fan, and how everything goes into it and the writing and the story and the melody, like you're mentioning, I like to think of the stories of how a lot of these songs were written. I think one of the songs that I heard, maybe it was about 6 months ago, I heard the story of how Dean Dillon wrote The Chair. And with you all the songs you've written, do you have maybe one or I mean you could tell as many stories as you want, but do you have a memorable song that you could think of where, this was an unorthodox way to write it or
Um, well, I mean, gosh, there's so many stories that every song comes together in its own way, and some songs will take me several writing sessions, to finish. It may take 3 or 4 uh, days sessions, writing, and sometimes they'll come in 30 minutes. Very rarely do they come in 30 minutes for me. I'm a really slow writer. I'm I like to edit once I get the thing and edit it, make it better. Uh, but yeah, I as far as the stories about a songwriting process, I know you was talking about Run, liking that song. It's when we sit down to write it, um, I had a melody already, and it was a kind of progressive melody for a country song. And I sit down with my friend Tony Lane, who's a really good writer, and I had this idea, which was not starting from the first line. It was called "Are You Into Me?" And what that was, the way we were going to make that creative was it was going to be "Are you into me?" like on a license plate where it'll be the letter R U N and number two M E. And so it was we could never really make it work with that melody, and it sounded a little too much novelty, I think, and you know for that melody. So we uh, Tony just after we worked on that for a few hours, Tony said, "Why don't we just call it Run?" I said, "Okie dokie." So we worked on it the rest of that day, and then finished it up the next day, and sent it sent it out. And it went on hold the very first day with George Strait. I mean, it went on hold with about four artists that same day, but George obviously got it, and thankfully, and did a great job on it.
They sure did, and like you said, four artists had it on hold. I think every if I had that chance, I know I'd put it on hold. It's legendary. I
Uh,
know a few people that say it's their favorite song of all time.
yeah,
It is
I've been
awesome.
lucky.
Now,
Thank you.
for you, as a songwriter, first, there's two parts to this question. I'll ask the first part first, and that's, do you have a list of your maybe 3 to 5 favorite songs that you've ever written?
I really don't, because I get asked that a whole lot, and I guess it just depends what mood that I'm in. Some days I'll wake up and other songs mean more to me than something else, and there's always songs that have that you like for different reasons. From a conceptual standpoint, I love the song "Who Invented the Wheel," which was on my record "If That Ain't Country." It's the first track on there, and it ended up getting cut by a really great band called Blackberry Smoke.
Yes.
They cut it. Trisha Yearwood cut it. I sang on harmony on her record for that, and um, but that song was one of the songs that really uh, got me noticed in Nashville because it was so unique. Nobody was really doing that kind of song, and so it helped me to break through among all of the thousands of writers. And so that song has a special place for me, and I love it. And but there's others. I got a song called "Kill Myself" that Tim McGraw cut that was really unique concept.
Oh yeah, it was. I've heard that song. That's that
Yeah,
the
and there's several songs like that. "Run" is a I like "Run," and but a lot of the stuff on my record are some of my favorites simply because that's which is why they were on my record,
exactly.
And a lot of those went on to be cut by other artists as well. But yeah, just it's just some days you wake up and you're humming one of your old rockers, and then some days it's a ballad. You just never know.
Now, this is not part two of the question because now you've inspired me to ask a new one. What is the longest song that you've had on hold, or one that you cut for yourself, like from the time you wrote it to the time it came out? What was the longest time in between?
Well, like any songwriter, I've got a whole lot of songs that's never been cut. But I've had songs on hold Um, I've had songs on hold with Tim McGraw for a year and a half, and they end up not cutting it
Mhm.
after letting them hold it for that long. Same with Faith Hill. Um, but usually when they go on hold, just depends on when they're cutting, when they're recording. Um, but I've had a year, and then before they finally record it, and then it may be another year before they single it. It depends how many singles they release.
Mhm.
If you're the third or fourth single, I mean, if you're the third single off of a record, that's just about a year before it comes out. And so yeah, it's a hurry up and wait kind of thing, and it's get that some patience, and then once it does come out, and if it does go to number one or top 10, and then you have to wait almost another year before you get any money. So
Really? Oh, I did not know that.
yeah, it's about 10 months to a year, I guess, before you really see anything. Once it charts. So
That's fascinating. I never would have thought that. I would have thought it was like week by week or something, with the charts by the week.
they collect it week by week. Your PRO, which is like BMI or ASCAP or CSAC. They monitor it, they track it, and then they pay out quarterly.
Ah,
Um, so it just depends when it falls, but yeah, but generally getting that first check usually takes about 10 months, it seems like, on average.
interesting. I never knew that. Well, anyway, getting back to part two of the question. Now,
Mhm.
you listed some of your favorite songs you've written. Now, how about some songs that you listen to over the years and say, damn, I wish I wrote that song?
Yeah. Well, gosh, there's a lot of those. I mean, anything that influenced you as a kid. Some of my favorite songs are so not what people would expect, because they listen to my music and they said, well, that doesn't sound like something you would write. And I'm like, well, it's not. It's just something that moves me, and so songs from when I was a kid. I was a big Chris Christopherson fan. He was probably my favorite writer, and I liked Tom T. Hall. Of course, that was way before my time, but it was my dad had all those records, and I just loved listening to him. Waylon Jennings was a huge fan of his stuff. But as far as individual songs, I mean, there's just there's so many. I mean, the obvious usual suspects are like "He Stopped Loving Her Today" is always considered in that top five of all time, by George Jones, and then "Chiseled in Stone" by Vern Gosdin is a brilliant, brilliant song. So it's hard. It's really hard to nail one down, because you like them for different reasons. I mean, I like anything from absolute bone country to Shania Twain or something like that even. But yeah, it just depends on my mood again.
I love that. And the last question I've got for you about songwriting is if you can go back in time, and write with anybody that you either never got the chance to write with, or they stopped writing before you got the chance to write with anybody, who would you want to sit in a room with and write a song?
Well, I never had a really big circle of songwriter co-writers, and so there just wasn't a ton of them. I had my close group, but I did write with Guy Clark. Um, I was scheduled to write with Waylon Jennings, uh, and he had this diabetes, I think it was, and ended up having to get an amputation. I was so thrilled about that, the idea that he wanted to write with me, and so that happened. So we had to cancel, and then he called again and wanted to reschedule. even after he'd lost his leg, I didn't think we would, he would write it all. And we rescheduled it. And a week before our writing session, he passed away.
Oh
I
man.
was up in New York playing playing a venue up there, and I got the call right when I was about to walk on stage. And I generally wouldn't have answered the call, but I, for whatever reason, I did, and they told me, and it really, it really sombered the mood um, for going on stage, and I made that announcement. But yeah, so that was a real bummer not getting to write with Waylon Jennings, and I never wrote with Willie Nelson, even though that we toured together for so long. I don't think he was doing much writing, and for whatever reason, it never really came up when we were talking on his bus or anything. Christopherson, I didn't get to write with him. I wish I had. But by the time I came along, those guys I don't think were writing really,
Yeah.
and certainly not co-writing to my knowledge. And but those would have been great, to sit down with those guys. Um, Obviously, the late great Hank Williams Sr. was such an amazing writer. Merle Haggard back in the day. Those were all before I was able to hold a pen. I wasn't even born actually. Some of
Huh?
that.
Oh, if it makes you feel better, I was listening to Buck Owens last night, so I love all that old
I
stuff.
love Buck Owens. He was so good.
And he was the king of the Bakersfield Sound.
Hmm.
Now, as the rest of the year goes on, somehow I I feel like the year's flying, but at the same time, it's only March. So we still got a whole 9.5 months left. What does the rest of the year look like for you in terms of playing shows and working on that new record?
Um, well, shows they just come in, and you just never know where you're going to go. But yeah, I'm doing some festivals this year. I'm doing there's a songwriting festival down in Palm Coast, Florida. It's the first week of May, first weekend of May. Actually, it starts the very end of April. It's like 4 days
Mhm.
into that first weekend of May, and it's called the Palm Coast Songwriters Festival, and it is one of, if not the best festivals out there because there's over 40 of the best songwriters in the world are there, and they get to perform, and you get to see them all. They're all under one big amphitheater in Palm Coast, and they just they'll go up there two or three at a time and take turns doing their thing, playing these big hits, and so that's a lot of fun. So I've been doing some of those kind of things, and just regular normal stuff like any kind of theaters or
Mhm.
venues, uh, and I've been for whatever reason, a lot of my gigs are on beaches or in the mountains or really nice locations. So uh, I'm happy about that.
Hey man, you can't complain about that. I've been stuck in like 20 degrees for 45 of
Oh,
the last 50 days.
yeah. I just got back from Montana. I was there for a week, and it was 3 feet of snow where I was at. Got down to 20 below zero one night,
Oh man.
and but it was great. I love Montana, and anytime I can go out there or Wyoming to play, it's great. California, do a lot of gigs in Florida, just everywhere. Um, but yeah, I've just got into doing these house concerts, and I only to find out that there's like an entire circuit of house concerts, hundreds of house concerts all across the country, and just your average person will decide to do it, and they'll just open up their home to their friends and family, and they'll have them gather and book you to come play, and it's everybody will bring food and stuff. It's like I'd never seen anything like it. It was almost like a Thanksgiving kind of thing with an entertainer, And so you really make a lot of friends with those kind of gigs, and I love that uh, because they're usually really good to you, and you have a relationship, an ongoing relationship after the show. So they have so many questions. They ask about this song and that song. Well, did you meet George Strait? Did you meet Tim McGraw or whoever? And they get thrilled hearing the stories about all that. And so I love doing the house concerts too. Yeah.
That sounds like a whole lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Well, folks, if you don't already follow Anthony on social media platforms, you got to go find him. Got to go stream his music. It is awesome. He's written tons of hits and he's got great songs on his albums. If That Ain't Country, like Chris Stapleton said, is his favorite country album of all time. Anthony, thanks so much for joining me.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the year, and we will see you guys next time.
All right. So thank you, buddy.